a lot of these books are reading like white feminists. If you're writing a black character, say that you're writing a black character, it'll probably be a fail. So hello, welcome to Rissell Reads. I'm LIgia, and today we are going to talk about Black Girl Romantasy. So I'm coming on here to refilm this intro because originally this video was supposed to be the search for a 5-star fantasy romance by a Black author. And spoiler alert, that did not happen. In fact, I DNF'd a lot of the books that I actually picked up, but because the day that you're actually seeing this video, Valentine's Day is tomorrow. We are in the month of love, and fantasy romance is very big. Like, I didn't want this to just be a negative video, so I'm going to still play the clips of everything that I was reading and giving you my thoughts on them. But at the end, I think I want to have a discussion on fantasy romance by Black authors, and then at the end also give a list of Black girl romantasy, because I think this experiment has really shown me that I don't think romantasy is really for me, at least not the current state of it. So I will come back at the end of this video and we will discuss it. I have done a fantasy romance reading vlog before, and to say that it did not go well was an understatement, which I guess maybe I'm exaggerating a little bit, because all of them were either like 3 stars or I just DNF'd them. And I just know that I can find a 5-star. I just know it. And even though I'm very picky with my 5 stars, I think that I will be able to find a 5-star fantasy romance by a Black author. The time that I did that vlog was like a few years ago at this point, and there's just been so many more books coming out by Black authors in the fantasy romance space, so I have a lot more to choose from. So I'm very much hoping that I will be able to find one. Now, I'm saying this, and I am very much also anticipating that there will be a lot of DNFs in this vlog, and that I will maybe have this vlog be more than 40 minutes, which I don't know how I feel about that. And I know it's because I'm a picky reader, and I do want to make a few disclaimers before I even start this, because just because I'm DNFing or I'm not giving something a 5-star, I am very much aware that I am a much pickier reader than a lot of other people. And that's not to say that I think I'm a better reader or anything than other people, because at the end of the day, we really enjoy what we enjoy. When it comes to fantasy romance, I am really looking for good writing. And another thing that I'm looking for in this kind of video is strong fantasy elements. I am a fantasy reader at heart. I come from a fantasy background, which is why a lot of these fantasy romances, they don't really appeal to me, because they come more so from the romance background, and mainly the contemporary romance background. And sometimes the contemporary romance seeps into the fantasy, and that is not on par with me. So I'm also looking for strong fantasy elements. One of the last things that I'm looking for is just chemistry. Like, I want to have that emotional pull towards the characters. Like, I want to swoon with these characters, make them fall in love with each other. I know that I will find a lot of enjoyable reads, but it will be that chemistry and just that extra level of just that emotional connection with the characters that will make the book a 5-star for me. So those 3 elements are what I'm looking for. And to be honest, I'm not exactly sure if I will find anything like that, but I'm very hopeful. And if this video starts to get too long, I may just call it quits after a few, because at the end of the day, I don't want this to diminish my enjoyment of reading. And one of my big goals for this year is just to enjoy reading again. So with all of that being said, we're going to go into the first book, and that is the last one by Rachel Howzell. So I've been hesitating on using this one as the first book, because I have tried another book by this author and I was not in love with it. I thought there was pacing issues. I didn't really like the characters and all this other things. But that was a thriller. And I'm wondering if the genre hop will be better. I'm Not sure. I've heard mixed things, but I've also only heard it from people that are strictly like romance readers. And I'm wondering if like the world building elements will be better than like what I'm typically used to in fantasy romance. So I don't know. I'm curious to know. I have only read a page so far and I'm not hating it so far. The character does have like memory issues, so I'm not sure how I'm going to feel about that in the long term. But I've heard very mixed things and I'm trying to just keep an open mind and hope for the best. So when I either finish this or have like other thoughts to say, I will come on and talk about this. But until then, I hope that you enjoyed the video and I will check in with you later. So we have the first book, the last one, and this one is not going to be 5 stars. I didn't finish it yet. I'm debating whether or not I'm just going to pause this or if I just want to straight DNF it. I just know that for the purposes of this vlog, I am not going to finish this. And there's multiple things that's keeping this from being a 5 star. One, I feel like the writing is borderline like cheesy and like just not flowing well. And then I also think that the pacing is not the best. Like I am currently like 116 pages in and I just feel like it's so slow and boring. Now there has been like action scenes happening and like I guess there's like a little bit of banter happening, which I'll get to that later. But honestly, like it's just kind of boring. Like she doesn't have her memory, so like a lot of the things that could be like cool, like she just doesn't know about them. And it's just like basically her in this boring, sick town, like trying to work off her debt. And like there's like just the mystery of like who she is, who's coming after her, and all these other things. But it's just kind of boring to read about from somebody who doesn't remember any of it. And I mentioned the banter, and it is borderline like cringy. Like I don't think that the two love interests really have great chemistry. So far their attraction for each other is definitely very like just physical, but I don't know, the way that they're like flirting with each other, it just reads kind of cringy sometimes. And then I don't know, like their chemistry doesn't really fit with like what I want. And yeah, I don't really like the romance at all. And I guess the last thing I would say in terms of like the world building coming from like a fantasy lens, I don't really like this world building. Like I said, like we're in this sickly town and a lot of people don't like her. And it also seems like she's the only black character in this world too. So she deals with like microaggression, like somebody trying to touch her hair, her being like othered and different. People are pretty much like she's like the villain and all this other stuff. And I'm just like, I don't want to read that. And some parts of it are interesting. Like just when like the magic's introduced or something, or just like some little bit of like history, I guess. But overall, like I don't think that the magic is done well, and I think that's partly because she doesn't have her memory. And some of the powers and stuff that she has, like it just feels so random. Like I don't know if there are actual rules in this world, which depending on if it's a soft or hard magic system will depend on like how it's done. But I'm just like it just feels very random, and I feel like the mind reading aspect, which you figure out in like the first like 50 or so pages that she has the mind reading ability, but that really detracts from like the chemistry that she has with the love interest because they're just reading each other's thoughts, and that's how you see that he's instantly attracted to her and admiring her body, which is also another thing that I want to discuss. Because one thing about fantasy romance that I think black authors should keep in mind is a lot of the same things that white authors do, it doesn't read the same when you have a black girl in it. Just because our histories with our bodies, with love, with autonomy, and just all these other things, like it's not the same. Like a lot of these books are reading like white feminists, and I don't understand why a black author would do that. And I'm not saying that this author does that. Like I do think she is writing through the lens of a black woman, but I don't know, just sometimes like the fantasy elements of it, Like when he is just admiring like her body, and this is a white man, like it's not even her that he likes, it is her body. And there's something to be said that yes, you can have attraction to another person, but to be ogled like that when it comes to a black woman's body, I'm not really dealing, like I don't like that in the story. And so far that is the extent of what their chemistry is. Like him liking her body, them wanting to have sex with each other. Like I don't know. I'm not liking that aspect. So I am not going to finish this in this vlog because it's not going to be a 5 star. I think I may finish it eventually because I skipped to the end and I'm intrigued to see how it got to that point. But yeah, not in this vlog. I think that the next book that I'm going to try is Rise of a Dark Throne by LIgia Cushman, I believe that's how you pronounce this author's name. And this is an Afro-Latina author, I believe. And so I know she takes parts of her culture and infuses it into this world. At least that's what I've seen when she's talked about it. So I've had this on Kindle Unlimited for the longest. So I'm going to finally try it and hopefully this is better. But I also think that this has a white presenting love interest as well. Not to say that I'm against it, but I'm just hoping that the way that the cultural dynamics are handled are a little bit better than the last one. And so we move on to book 2. Okay, so I am 20% into Rise of a Dark Throne, and this one is not going to be 5 stars. That isn't to say I'm not enjoying my time. I am enjoying my time somewhat, but I just know based off of the writing that it's not going to be 5 stars. I was immediately hooked by the prologue. I really enjoyed watching this king and his son and just giving like that background information. Usually I don't like prologues, especially when it's just giving background information, but this one was fine. I was pulled in by the story, so it did its job. And then we move on to present day where this king thinks that something bad is going to happen, but it's his daughter's wedding, so they don't do anything about it. And then this princess wakes up and she finds out pretty much everyone is dead from this thing called darkness. And yeah, she also wakes up with healing powers. So yes, so far I have a lot of questions. Just even like, what even is this darkness? Why wasn't she spared? Her sisters also end up disappearing. So I just have a lot of questions with everything going on, but I feel like maybe it'll be answered as I continue on in this book. And I do plan to actually continue. But like I said, this book isn't going to be 5 stars because of the writing. So the first thing about the writing is that it is told in third person omniscient. Like we keep moving around to other characters' heads. And I am just personally not a fan of that kind of storytelling. I won't say that it's not like jarring when like she moves to different characters' head, but it just feels so random. Like, why are we getting the perspective of the prince's like guard or whatever? Like, I don't care. Why do we get the perspective of the king in the first, like when we were being introduced? Like, I guess I kind of understood to give like background information, but also the king isn't the main character and he dies. So I don't understand why we had to get information from his perspective. And then that leads me to like my next thing with the writing is that I just feel like there's so much info dumping. Why are we getting pages of pages of just info of like random things? And one of my biggest things is like there's so many descriptions of what the characters are wearing, so many like background information on just like the world itself, and I'm just like, can we not? Like, let's just get back to it. Like, can we just get on with the scene? And I think that's why like the scene just feels like so long sometimes. But the only thing that's really like keeping me going is that I really am intrigued with the story. Like the princess, she's the only one that survives and she has healing powers. So she can heal mostly everybody in her kingdom except like her family, and her sisters are actually missing. And so she becomes the queen and she has to she's rebuilding her society after this darkness came and destroyed everything. Which also another question is just like, if this all happened in one night, how did the society like die overnight? Like I don't understand that, but anyway, I'm still intrigued enough to keep going. She is going to this other kingdom who they have a history with. The other kingdom tried to subjugate them, but when their king falls ill or whatever, she has to go over there to heal him because news of her magical powers has come to light. So she has met the love interest at this point, and their dynamic will be interesting, I think. I'm not exactly like pulled into them yet, but I think that since they just met, like it's fine. But the author is good at storytelling. I think the world is interesting. I just think that the execution is not the best, which is why it's not going to be 5 stars and why I will be moving on in this video. Now, the next book that I wanted to read is The Coven of Ruin, which I don't know what this book is about. I've heard that it's fantasy romance, and I know that it's by a Black author. So that is my extent of what I know about this one. So hopefully this one will be one that I can see potentially becoming 5 stars. But I will have to check in and let you know. Quick update. I think I'm going to stop the Coven of Ruin. I believe that's what this book is called. And it's not that I'm not enjoying it. I'm currently like 9% into it. But I'm just wondering if this character is even Black. Like, the first description we got from her came from the male love interest. He said that she has forest eyes, which I believe forest green eyes. That's usually how people describe that. I'm like, okay, I've seen Black people with green eyes. That's not a problem, whatever. And then we get another description of her saying she has honey colored hair. And I'm just like, okay, that doesn't necessarily mean that she's not Black. Like, Black people dye their hair all the time. We get extensions and all this other stuff, and that is kind of a natural hair color, I guess. But the more I'm thinking about it, I'm just like, forest green eyes, honey colored hair, and I'm questioning if this character is Black when I'm trying to find a Black fantasy romance. I don't think that's really what I want in this project. And the fact that I literally had to go to the author's like social media, and at first I went to her Instagram. I didn't see any character photos or anything on there. And then I went to TikTok and I found all of these character drawings. And I don't want to get into identity politics because I'm not biracial. I don't know anything about that experience except the plight of biracial people that we're always getting in media these days. But like, the fact that I'm questioning that this is a Black person, and I know that the love interest isn't Black, but if I'm questioning and having to search, that is a flag for me. I'm not going to say it's a red flag, and I'm not going to say it's a green flag. Like, I don't know, but this author really promotes that she writes Black witches and Black gods and stuff. And I'm just like, who is Black? Like, I don't understand. Who is Black? I don't know. I have so many conflicting thoughts about this. And I think the reason why I'm taking it like much harder is that I feel like sometimes Black authors like to play on this ambiguity and try to reach an audience that's not Black people. And so they give all these ambiguous descriptions. And I feel like that's what this author is doing. Not once in this 9% do I remember the character being described with like brown skin, even light brown skin. Like, it's just the honey colored hair, the forest green eyes, and that could be a white person. And the fact that I had to go search, like, I don't like the ambiguity. If you're writing a Black character, say that you're writing a Black character. I don't understand why we have this ambiguity with this description. I guess I'm just gonna leave my thoughts at that because I am liking the story. Like, it starts off with like action and the characters aren't super annoying so far and the writing isn't terrible. But when I'm trying to find a fantasy romance by a Black author, this is not what I'm thinking. Like, these characters could be white and I am not about supporting that at all. So I am going to move on to the next book. And so we are going to keep it moving. I think the next one that I'm going to try is Celestial Bodies. This is an author I have tried before. In my first fantasy romance vlog, I read The Fall of Souls by this author, and I did DNF it. But I'm hoping that because I liked the author's writing and I did like the chemistry and tension between the characters a little bit, I'm hoping that like maybe the pacing issues that I had and just the annoying female character will not be in this one. So that will be the next one that I try. And I actually think that this will be the first Black romance in this one. So I don't know. Hopefully it is worthy of a 5 star. We will see. I have finished Celestial Bodies, and I think I would give this one like 3.5 stars, maybe even like a low 3 stars, because honestly, I feel like this could have been good, but the first half of this book was very much so slow, and it's the same problem that I have with The Fall of Souls by this author. I think this one was a little bit better because they weren't like traveling as much. So I hate traveling in fantasy so much. So that one just made it even worse for me. But here in Celestial Bodies, she's sent to the Lunar Kingdom to basically kill the Lunar Prince. And the first half of this, like she has agency in like maybe like the first 20%. And then like the 20% to the 50% mark, like she's like stuck in the room. Like she doesn't really do anything. And I feel like they also didn't really have chemistry there either. Like I feel like their banter was very much what you always see in fantasy romance. Her being like the headstrong girl, him liking that she's not listening to him being the possessive, angry, like brute guy that we always see in fantasy romance. And I just was not into that at all. There's also the fact that like the magic in this system is purely vibes. Like the magic makes no sense to me. Like I get that they're supposed to be like descendants or something from the celestial bodies. Like literally, I think it's like the planets, the sun, anything celestial in our like solar system. But the problem that I had with that is that like it's very vague and like what these like celestial like bodies actually do for them. Like at some point she's like healing somebody and then she's like glowing sunlight because she's like the sun or something. The male love interest, he has shadow magic. I don't know. I guess that comes from the moon or something and the shadows, or I don't know. He has some kind of curse on him too, so maybe it came from that. Honestly, I was skimming majority of this book, but he has some kind of shadow magic that he can control his like shadows. But he's the only person that has it, so I think it is from like his curse. Like his shadows, like he can just make them do like whatever. Like he can't heal. Like the only thing that is with like his shadows is that like he can move them around and be like menacing and all of that. He almost reminds me of like the Darkling. And so maybe the magic is kind of like that. I don't remember much about the Grishaverse and the Darkling, but that seemed to be like his home thing too. But I don't see how like the curse and like all of that really vibes with like shadows. Like the world building is very vague. Like it is purely just to be there for like the magical vibes of being in this fantasy kingdom. And the politics, like they are warring kingdom, I guess. So that wasn't really like a big part until the end. And I don't know, like after the 50% mark, it got a little bit better, but it isn't until maybe like the 60% mark that I think that they actually have a decent conversation with each other to actually get to know each other. And that's also the first time that they have like intimacy with each other in terms of sex. So I feel like after that point, they didn't really talk to each other. It was purely like them connecting with like the sex, which is fine, but also not what I was looking for in a fantasy romance. I think a lot of authors get stuck on the smut being the romance part of it, but even if you have smut, and I'm not even saying this from like a purity standpoint, even if you have smut, you still need to build the character relationships with each other. But I think another part of this book is that the characters just feel so stereotypical of a fantasy romance. Like I said, she is the headstrong female main character that always talks backs and all of that. And he is the dark, angry, possessive, anger issues, like male main character that we always see, but of course he has a tortured past and he's not as bad as he thinks. And so honestly, I think if you like those vibes, you might enjoy this. I'm saying this as a person that is finding that I probably just don't like romantasy because these tropes and these things that I keep seeing in this genre, like I don't like. And honestly, I'm 4 books in, I think. Wait, am I 4 books in? Hold on. I've DNF so many, I've lost track, and these books are all starting to blur together. So yeah, I'm 4 books in, and I just feel like I'm not necessarily getting like the same characters on all of them, but it's like giving me like the same vibes of what I don't want to see in romantasy. And I hate that I'm like doing this with like black authors because honestly, I think that they are doing exactly what the genre is. But when I'm coming at it and when I'm thinking of what I want in fantasy romance, I am not getting that. I think that people who like the genre will like these books. But I think I'm starting to come to the conclusion that I don't like it. Like fantasy and romance probably just do not belong together in my head. And I hate that because separately, I do like them. I have found that I really like some contemporary romance. Some of them are still just pretty average, but like I do like some contemporary romance if the banter is hitting and their connection is hitting. Like, I like that. And then I do like fantasy when you give me those epic plots, when you give me those character driven, all magic, like world building, like all of that. Like, if you give me all of that, it could be great. But I just don't think that we're getting those elements together very well. A lot of them, either the banter or the chemistry isn't there outside of like the sex. And even then, sometimes the sex isn't even good. And then the fantasy doesn't make any sense. And I don't know. I am hesitant to even continue this vlog because I have about like 6 or 7 more that I know I could try. But the way that I'm feeling like right now about romantasy, I feel like I might be doing these authors a disservice when it comes to trying their books when I'm just like so burnt out on literally trying to give these authors a chance, trying to find a book that is just like amazing and like the epitome of what I want in fantasy romance. I think I might try 1 or 2 more books to end this vlog, but I think officially that I am not going to find a 5-star fantasy romance. I think that this is literally just going to be like a taste test for me and it'll probably be a fail. So I don't want to continue until I find a 5-star fantasy romance. I don't think that's going to happen. And maybe that's on me from expecting a little bit too much from a genre that I'm really just now like diving into. But yeah, I don't know. I think like I said, I will try 2 more. And if this ends up a success, I will be happy. But at this time, I don't think that it will. I think I will find some decent reads. Like, I think Celestial Bodies was okay for what it was. And I think that the TK Tucker book, it'll probably be fine if I ever finish it. The next book that I'm going to try is Cindered Glass. I have hope for this one. I have tried the first page and I'm not hating it. So I think this will be my next book to try. So I am back and I didn't actually pick up Cindered Glass. Instead, I tried a chapter of like the next 4 romantasy books that I was potentially interested in. And the one that actually called to me most was A Noble's Eternal Heart, which I randomly found, I think, on Threads, I think. And this one, I really love the first chapter. It really pulled me in. It kind of has the amnesia trope like the last one, but I feel like this one was done like way better. Like I feel like we weren't having like a lot of random world building issues, but I also don't think that the world was like super like fleshed out either. Not in terms of like it's not a cohesive world, but just in terms of like this is a novella and it's not really about like the world building in this one. It really is about the sexual tension between the main character and the love interest. And I liked it in the beginning, but I feel like chapter 5, like they already had sex, and then at that point, like since this is a novella, like I think that the sexual tension was just lost because they already had sex. And then it was trying to introduce like this fantasy plot towards like the end, and I just lost interest. Like, I think it was okay, but I wish it was a little bit better, like spread out in terms of like building up that tension, because I think the author is great at that sexual tension. Like, the main character is very sexually liberated, which is great to see. I think that she's actually one of the people that I've seen really own her sexuality a lot better than a lot of these other books. But I think just like the plot and the sex part, I don't think that was like balanced to me. So yeah, I just couldn't find myself interested in the fantasy plot and even like their romance, because they had like one sex scene and then they're like in love, which also there's like a history to that, like why they think that they love each other. But like, it just didn't work for me. So I actually DNF'd it at 80% because I just didn't care anymore. So that will wrap up all of the books I'm going to try in this video, because I'm actually very burned out from Romantasy at this moment. It was really putting me in a reading slump, and even like the thought of picking up another Black Girl Romantasy was giving me like the ick. Like, I just did not want to pick it up. And I think that'll bring me to like the discussion that I want to have about Black Girl Romantasy. When I first started this video, I said I was looking for three things: romantic chemistry, good fantasy plot, and good writing, I think. And I think part of what I want to talk about is not just a problem that I see just in Romantasy and just in Romantasy by Black authors. I think this is just like across the board. Like, I think we are getting to the point that like spice and smut and like just those sex scenes are becoming the thing that people think makes romantic chemistry, and that's not really the thing. And I'm not saying this from like a purity culture standpoint, and I'm not saying this because I prefer closed romance. Like, honestly, A Noble's Eternal Heart actually had like the best sexual tension, and I really actually enjoyed those sex scenes. But a lot of these books I actually did like skip them when they were present, and it's because like you're not really building up that tension between the characters, or even that like emotional connection between the characters. Like, they're not connecting on anything besides they want to have sex with each other, which in a romance, that's not really what I'm looking for. Like, I think sex can be a great thing to build intimacy with each other. I don't like the term clean romance just because it implies that sex is dirty. And while people can like dirty sex, like, sex itself is not an inherently dirty thing to include in romance. But I think that we're getting into this place that like the chemistry that people have in these books really just relies on the smut, that they're not really fleshing out these characters enough to really pull in like why they are connecting with the other character. And I think that's just because they're not doing characterization right. Like, they're not really understanding who these people are, because there was a Romantasy article that was really talking about how people like to just like put themselves in like fantasy romance or something. And I think that because we're at that point, like, these characters aren't people. Like, they are literally just self inserts, or they are literally just like bland enough and just have like enough of like a drive just to get the reader through a story, but not necessarily like a fully fleshed out character. And I think just because we are in this place in reading right now that like people don't actually want to read about like a strong character, like they really just want to see themselves in literature. Like, it's not inherently a bad thing, but also literature is supposed to help with expanding our horizons. And I just don't think that Romantasy is really doing that well. And I think because we are in this place right now where it is more the norm to not have fully fleshed out characters, they're not really building new romantic chemistry. And I think that brings me to like my next point, is that a lot of these male love interests are pretty much the same. The only male love interest that was actually pretty different from everybody else was Celestial Bodies. And that's because like he was actually a BIPOC person. I'm pretty sure he was Black, but I'm gonna say BIPOC to be safe. And then he was also deaf. So I actually really appreciated that representation, because all these other love interests are white men. And I'm not opposed to white men being love interests. Like, I really don't care as long as they're fully fleshed out characters. But a lot of them are pretty much the same person. Like, I can't tell you the names of any of these people. I can't tell you anything interesting about them. I think one was like a vampire prince, and yeah, honestly, I can't even tell you anything about any of those men because they were just like very bland and just like the typical fantasy romance protagonist that I feel like you see. Like, even though I praise Celestial Bodies for being more diverse, like he was literally still just like a shadow daddy. I wish there was like more diversity with male love interests too. And even going to the female love interests, like I think a lot of them have been like light skinned or biracial protagonists. There's only two. Two out of the five were actually dark skinned girls, which I appreciated. But I think that Romantasy as a whole is dealing with like a colorism issue, and even with like the casting of Children of Blood and Bone, I think we're going to see this in the fantasy space a lot, just because another point that I'm really starting to like see in this space is that I think a lot of these authors are trying to reach a white audience instead of a black audience. And I hesitate to even say that, but I was really like thinking about it because there was a post, which I don't even know if I should like say who the author is because I don't want to be messy, and this author has a book coming out, so I'm not going to actually say who it is. But there was a post basically talking about how this author wanted to be mainstream with their romantasy release. Like, they have one coming out in the fall. And disclaimer, I know I'm not interested in this author's work because, one, I tried another book by this author, I absolutely hated it. And two, the little things that I've been like hearing about the story by this author, it reads literally like a black version of a white romantasy. And I don't want that. All of that to be put aside, like this author was talking about how they were trying to go towards like mainstream romantasy. And me, as a black reader who is looking for more romantasy and wants to be in that space and wants to even like write in that space, like it just rubbed me wrong that I'm seeing these authors really striving to be mainstream when mainstream is white. Like, you're really striving for your white readers. And I think in these books that I've seen, I'm not going to say like they read like they're written for white women, but a lot of them, they don't really deviate from what you would see in a white romantasy. But one thing that I definitely noticed in a lot of these books is that they use the C word for a male's genitalia. And I'm not gonna like say across the board like black people don't use that, because obviously these authors do. But like, I don't know. Like, every time I was even seeing that word on the page, like I kept thinking about like just that, is it like a song or something? Like, it's like a rooster crowing or something. I don't know. Like, every time I see that, like I just don't see black people. And I don't think that black people as a whole, not saying everybody, but like as a whole, we don't really use the C word for a male's genitalia. So like, I don't know. It's just like one of those things. But like, I see it in white romanticies, and I feel like they're copying that formula with white authors because they are trying to get that white audience and be mainstream. But like, I was talking to one of my writer friends, and we were just like, why are we looking at these white authors and trying to mimic them and trying to hold them as like the standard of what we should be, when honestly, like, we know white mediocrity is a thing. Like, we know they get away with like the barest minimums, even with like the last one getting like so many like trash reviews and stuff. Like, it's literally probably the black version of a white romantasy. Like, I think a lot of people compared it to Fourth Wing, but we don't get that privilege to be as terrible as Fourth Wing because it's a black girl. So I don't understand why these authors are trying to be in that space when they already say that they don't want us. My critique partner even brought up that Lore of the Wild literally was like the lowest sales of like Fairy Loot or whatever, and people were like, we don't want this because it's a black girl. And I'm just like, there's only so many times that these white fantasy romance readers can tell you that they don't want your black stories, but why are you still trying to reach for them? Like, I feel like we as black authors should be trying to reach the black audience. I don't know, it just rubs me wrong that I see us just trying to mimic mediocrity, basically. And I don't understand it. I don't like it. And it just leaves me as a reader like, is this space even for me? Like, are these books even written for me? Because it seems like you want the white readers, like, you don't want to write this for me as a black reader. And I love fantasy and I love romance, but like, it's obvious that you really don't really want me in this, but you expect us to still support you, even though you're not writing for us. And I think that brings me to another point in that, like, a lot of these women, they still read like white women but with black skin. And I don't even want to go into like just the black politics of like what it means to be black and what it doesn't mean. But like, these books are really writing these like headstrong, they can like fight and they can be like sexual and all these other things, just because that's what we're seeing in a lot of romantasy right now in terms of the white romantasy. But I think for a black woman to be in that space, like, it reads so differently. And I talked about this a little bit in like the last one when I was talking about that, but like, these are basically like the strong black woman trope and the Jezebel trope. And I think part of it is because they're not fully fleshing out these characters. And so everything is very surface level. And I think another part of it is that I don't think they're really thinking about like how much white supremacy is really in romantasy right now. Like, I just made like a post on like my author Instagram that was just like, the touch her and die trope really gives me like the ick, because it literally reminds me of just like how white men would literally like kill black people for looking at a white woman wrong, for doing anything to a white woman. But like, that's the energy people are praising. And I'm just like, in this current climate, I don't think that that's a thing that we really should be like praising. Now, don't get me wrong, I like the protective energy of it, but when it comes to like seeing how that plays out in fantasy romance, like, I don't know. And it honestly makes me a little bit scared that like these are the things that people are loving, but that's a whole other conversation. And I guess the last thing that I'll say is just that I wish that the fantasy was better in a lot of these. Like, I want the epic worlds and I want the plots that go with it. And I get that romance is very much like, you focus on the romance, the fantasy stuff is secondary. But a lot of the fantasy stuff doesn't make sense or it's not explained. And I think a lot of it is just that it's just vibes, which, okay, but like, I wish that there was like a better balance. Things still have to make sense. Like, it can't just be vibes. Like, things have to make sense. Like, Celestial Bodies, like, I don't think that the magic system really made sense. The last one, the magic system didn't make sense because the character didn't know anything and nobody knew anything, so nothing was really explained. And I don't know. I think that fantasy across the board could be a little bit better in the romantasy genre. I said a lot of things about black girl romantasy and just romantasy in general that I'm not really liking, but I do want to end this on a positive note, because I do like the fact that authors are trying to infiltrate this space. I just wish that they were actually writing for the black readers who would actually support them. And to end this video, I am actually going to go through just a few romantasy books that I have not read, but potentially they may be like your cup of tea. I will eventually read them when I'm not in like a reading slump and I'm actually okay enough to try black girl romantasy again, but I know that people are looking for these books, so here we go. The first one that I have to talk about is Heavy is the Head, Love and War, and Heavy is the Head, Kingdom Come. This series is actually the one that got me into black girl romantasy, and it's not perfect by any means. Like, I think that it still shows some of like the problems that I have with black girl romantasy in general, but this one does have two black love interests, which is nice. It features dragons, and the fantasy plot was definitely there more. And it does have like political intrigue and like battles and stuff. Like, I do enjoy this, and I just enjoy actually seeing like a darker skinned black woman in this. I do prefer the second book more than I prefer the first one, but I think that's just because I think more of the angst is in this one, and I love angst. So definitely check this one out if you have not. You may like it. And then I realized that I have not read any sapphic ones, but I found one by an author that I just followed on YouTube, which I'll link her channel down below if you want to follow along with her journey. But this is the Duchess's Bodyguard, and I don't know anything about this besides that it's sapphic, so it's definitely on my list. And then I have Brace the Tide, which is another one that I found on Threads, and I don't know much about this one either, but I think from the few things that I've seen about it, like it almost looks like it's going to be polyamorous, which could be interesting. And then I have the Orc Prince, which I know nothing about this either. So I saw a black girl on the cover, and hopefully it's by a black author. So yeah. And then we have Cindered Class, which I did mention in this video. And this is a Cinderella retelling that is following a girl who is arranged to be married to, I think, a fae prince or something. From what I read of it so far, it's not bad. It just didn't capture my interest like A Noble's Eternal Heart. And then we have pretty much anything by Angela J. Ford. I think she's been in the Romantasy space for a long time. I've never read anything by her, but I've heard good things for the most part. And then we have The Fate of Onyx and Ivory. This author really goes hard for Sarah J. Maas. So potentially if you like Sarah J. Maas's books, you would enjoy this one. I don't. So I still want to try it to see if the author brings anything original, but yeah, I would keep that in mind. And then we have the Book of Cin. This one I'm most excited for. I also think that this author goes hard for Sarah J. Maas, but this one, like the screenshots of like the prose and stuff that I've been seeing, like it has intrigued me. So I'm willing to pick this one up, hopefully. But also these Romantasy books are like 500 plus pages, and where I'm at right now in my reading, I want something a little bit shorter. And then we have The House of Glass and Night. I don't know what this is about at all, but I saw a black girl on the cover. I saw there's a black author attached to it, so I put it on this list. And then we have Twin Blades. This is another one that I have started, and I really liked the first chapter of it, but again, it just didn't hold my interest like A Noble's Eternal Heart. And I actually have an arc of this that I'm super late on reviewing, but I'm hoping that I will get to it soon, because this one also has a BIPOC love interest, which I'm always looking for. And then we have Bright, which I think this one is a vampire fantasy romance, maybe? I'm not exactly sure, but I saw this one on Instagram. And then we have A Saga of Shields and Swords, and this is an author that I started following on Instagram as well, and this one is going to be a lot more spicy from what I've seen of this author. And then we have A Certain Slant of Light, which I found on YouTube through a YouTuber that I cannot remember right now, but this one I am hoping to get to soon. I heard good things from that YouTuber about it, but yeah, I'm just burned out from Romantasy right now. And then the last one I will talk about is When the Stars Alight, which is one that I found on the Melanin Library one day, and this one, it could be interesting. I think the author is from the UK, maybe? I don't know. But I know that there's going to be a third book in this one, and I'm intrigued by this one because I really like anything like stars or celestial and stuff, and I think that this main character is a star or something, so very intrigued with that one. That is all the Black Girl Romantasy that I know of so far. I know that there are a few authors that are going to be coming out with books hopefully in like the next year or so. I'm not exactly sure, but I have been following them on Instagram just to keep up with like where they are on their process, and I'll link a few of them down below as I like know about them. But yeah, like I said, I'm happy that black authors are getting into the space, and I'm excited to see more of where this genre could go, because even though it's not like a new space, I think that black authors are still trying to find their footing in it and see what it looks like for us. I think paranormal romance has done a great job of that. Paranormal romance has been around a little bit longer, so I think that they have found like their footing a little bit more in terms of that representation for black readers, but I think Romantasy is still trying to find its footing. So that will wrap up this video. I feel like I talked a long time, and I'd be curious to know about like your thoughts on anything that I said, if you even agree, because sometimes I feel like maybe I'm just like the only one feeling this way, and I know I have a lot of unpopular opinions when it comes to books, but maybe other people feel this way about Romantasy, or maybe I'm just like misunderstanding something about like the entire genre. So I'd be very interested to know your thoughts. And if you don't want to do that, you can always just leave, let's leave like a brown heart, I guess, for just the black girls and the romance space. So I thank you so much for watching, and I will see you in my next video. Bye.